My name is Thora. I'm 29 years old. Ever get that feeling? That if you just vanished, it might take a few hours for anyone in your own house to even notice? It's that strange, hollow ache of being physically present but completely absent from the family portrait. You were the good kid, the easy one, the child they never had to worry about, which, in a twisted bit of irony, meant they never really had to see you at all. You learned to live in the quiet spaces, to become an expert at taking up as little room as possible, both physically and emotionally. You became a ghost in your own home, a whisper when you should have been a voice. For my entire childhood and well into my adult life, I was that invisible child. This wasn't because of some cartoon villainy or obvious cruelty. It grew out of a much quieter, more insidious kind of pain, the kind that comes from what wasn't there. So, this is the story of how I stopped being a ghost, how I went from being a textbook case of emotional neglect to reclaiming my voice, taking up space, and finally learning to be visible to the one person who mattered most, me. It all started with silence. Not the peaceful kind, but a hollow, echoing silence where questions about my day should have been, where validation should have lived. I can still feel myself standing in the doorway of the living room, clutching a drawing I'd spent all afternoon on. It was this detailed, colorful landscape, the best thing I'd ever made. I was buzzing with that electric, childhood need to be seen, you know? That desperate urge for a simple, wow, look at what you did. My parents were in the room, but they were wrestling their own ghosts. Financial stress, exhaustion, the quiet static of a strained marriage. I held up my masterpiece. Look, I said, my voice barely making a sound. My dad glanced up, gave me a quick, tired smile. That's nice, kiddo. My mom mumbled something similar, her eyes already back on a stack of bills. The drawing ended up on the counter, and by the next morning, it was buried under junk mail. Forgotten. I wasn't crushed in that moment. I wasn't yelled at. I was simply erased. And that slow, quiet erasure became the wallpaper of my childhood. That one moment was pretty much my entire childhood in a nutshell. To get why I became invisible, you have to get the world my parents were living in. They weren't bad people, at all. By most standards, they were good parents. We always had food, a roof over our heads, clean clothes. They met every single one of my physical needs. But emotionally, they were running on empty. They were dealing with their own unresolved traumas, the kind of heavy baggage that gets passed down through generations in total silence. My father worked 2 jobs, always tired, his mind always on the next bill. My mother was wrestling with a quiet, simmering depression that just stole her energy. They were, as psychologist Dr. Jonas Webb calls them, emotionally unavailable, physically present, but emotionally absent, drowning in their own stuff, with no capacity to tune into mine. In a family system under that kind of stress, kids will instinctively find a role to play. It's a survival tactic. You might have the hero child who gets straight A's to make everyone proud, or the scapegoat who acts out and soaks up all the family's negative energy. I became the lost child. My little kid brain saw the tension and came to a simple, protective conclusion. Do not be a burden. Don't make noise. Don't have needs. Just be easy. By disappearing, I thought I was helping. I required nothing, so I wouldn't drain the family's already low battery. I was the quiet corner of the family, and because of that, I was completely overlooked. My life just became a series of those quiet erasures. I learned to swallow my sadness when my best friend moved away because my parents' plates were already overflowing. I learned to celebrate my own small wins in my head, because asking them to celebrate with me felt like asking for something they just didn't have. I remember winning my school's spelling bee. I walked all the way home, clutching this little plastic trophy, my heart pounding with a mix of excitement and total dread. When I showed it to my mom, she was on the phone, arguing with a credit card company. She put her hand over the receiver, glanced at the trophy and said, "Oh, honey, that's wonderful." before diving right back into the fight. That trophy sat on my dresser for years, a monument to an achievement that felt entirely my own in the loneliest way possible. It was a symbol of my hyper-independence, something I confused with strength for decades. But that kind of emotional self-sufficiency has a staggering price, because no one ever asked, "How do you feel about that?" I eventually just stopped asking myself. My own feelings became a foreign language. I could tell you what I thought, but I had no idea what I felt. Sadness was just a vague, heavy fog. Anger was a spark I was terrified would burn the house down, so I stamped it out instantly. Joy felt suspicious. I basically lived in a state of emotional numbness. As I got older, the consequences of this internal emptiness started poisoning my life in ways I couldn't understand yet. I was just haunted. Haunted by this quiet but constant anxiety, this deep-down feeling that I was fundamentally flawed. I developed a crushing perfectionism. If I could just do everything perfectly, maybe then I'd be worthy of being seen. In relationships, I was a total chameleon, a people pleaser of the highest order. I'd become whatever I thought the other person wanted, terrified that if they saw the real, empty me, they'd be gone. Intimacy was terrifying because it meant being vulnerable, and I didn't even know how to be vulnerable with myself. I felt like an imposter in my own life, always on the outside looking in, watching other people live with a sense of connection that felt completely out of reach. From the outside, I looked fine. But inside, I was a ghost, haunting the edges of a life that wasn't really mine. For years, I was convinced there was just something wrong with me, like I was born with a screw loose. I'd look back at my childhood and see no big, dramatic trauma. My parents provided for me. They didn't hit me or scream at me. So, I figured all my feelings of emptiness and anxiety had to be my fault. I was just too sensitive, too needy, too broken. The big turning point, my first real aha moment, it didn't come in a flash of lightning. It came on a random afternoon, scrolling online, desperately typing questions like, "What is wrong with me?" into a search bar. And then I stumbled upon an article and later a book by Dr. Jonas Webb, a psychologist who gave a name to my entire life's experience, childhood emotional neglect, or SEEN. Reading her words felt like someone had finally walked into the dark, dusty attic of my brain and flipped on a light. Sin, she explained, isn't about what your parents did to you. It's about what they failed to do. It's their failure to notice, validate, and respond to your feelings. It's an invisible injury, an absence. It's all the conversations that never happened, the comfort that was never offered. Because it's an act of omission, it leaves no visible scars. You can't point to a single event and say, "That's what hurt me." The hurt comes from thousands of tiny moments of nothing. This was the key that unlocked everything. My pain was real. My feelings were valid. I wasn't broken. I was wounded. That emptiness I felt wasn't a character flaw. It was a predictable result of having your emotional self ignored. I learned that when a child grows up in a house where feelings are treated as a burden, they get a powerful, unspoken message. Your feelings don't matter, so you don't matter. To survive, the kid does the only thing that makes sense. They wall off their emotions, and they carry that wall into adulthood. Realizing this distinction between the lost child role I played and my true self was so freeing. That role was a costume I wore to survive. It wasn't me. Underneath all the people-pleasing and numbness, there was a real person with real feelings who was just waiting to be seen. It wasn't my fault. As I read more, it was like someone handed me a checklist of my own secret pain. All the common signs of SEN were my signs. A feeling of emptiness. Yep, that chronic, nagging sense that something was missing, even when life was good. A fear of being a burden. Check. The core belief that my needs were an inconvenience to everyone else. Harsh self-criticism. Double check. That relentless inner critic telling me I was never good enough. Difficulty with emotions. Oh yeah, not just expressing them, but even knowing what they were. Someone would ask how I felt, and my mind would be a total blank. Trouble with self-discipline. Dr. Webb explains this one perfectly. When parents don't provide that emotional structure, kids can grow up to be adults who can't get themselves going. That was me. Bursts of energy followed by long stretches of just nothing. Feeling fundamentally different from other people. The big one. That feeling of being separated from everyone else by an invisible wall. Seeing my struggles laid out not as my personal failures, but as common symptoms of a known injury was the most profound validation I'd ever felt. For the first time, I felt seen. Not by a person, but by knowledge. And that knowledge gave me a flicker of hope that if this wound had a name, maybe, just maybe, it could be healed. So what was the final push? The moment I decided I couldn't live as a ghost for one more day, it came, as it so often does, from a complete and total crisis. A long-term relationship ended, and my partner's parting words were, "I feel like I don't even know you." It was a dagger because I knew he was right. How could he know me when I didn't know myself? That night, sitting alone in my apartment, the emptiness wasn't a quiet hum anymore. It was a screaming void. The pain was so absolute that it finally shattered the numbness. And for the first time, I didn't run from it. I let the loneliness completely swallow me. In that rock-bottom moment, a new voice, a tiny, quiet one, spoke up. And it said, "No more." That was day one. The process was messy and definitely not a straight line, but I took it one step at a time. Step 1. I had to name the wound and grieve the childhood that wasn't. The first step was just to keep learning. I devoured books on CN, family systems, and inner child work. Giving my experience a name was the most powerful move I made. It took the pain out of the box labeled shame and put it in the box labeled injury. Then came the grief. And this part is crucial, and it hurts. I had to let myself mourn the childhood I should have had. I grieved for the little girl with the spelling bee trophy and no one to share it with. I grieved for the teenager figuring out heartbreak all alone. I wrote letters to my parents in a journal, letters I'd never send, just pouring out all the hurt and anger. You can't heal a wound you pretend isn't there. Step 2. I learned to hear myself by actually listening. After a lifetime of tuning out my own feelings, I had to learn to listen to my inner world like a total beginner. I started with a simple exercise, the 3 times a day check-in. I'd set an alarm on my phone, morning, noon, and night. When it went off, I'd stop and ask myself 3 questions. What am I feeling right now? Where is that feeling coming from? What do I need? At first, the answer was usually, I don't know, but I kept at it. I literally used a feelings wheel I found online to give me the words. Bad became anxious or frustrated. I started a journal just to track my feelings. An entry might just be, not in my stomach after my boss's email. I think it's anxiety. I'm afraid I messed up. I think I need a 5-minute walk. This simple practice was revolutionary. I was finally becoming a compassionate witness to my own life. I was starting to reparent myself. Step 3. I found my voice by learning to take up space. This was the hardest part, taking the internal work and making it external. It meant setting boundaries, being assertive. I started small. I practiced saying no to things without giving a 5-minute long apologetic excuse. The first time I just said, "Sorry, I can't make it," and left it at that. My heart was pounding. I felt guilty for days, sure I'd offended the person, but the world didn't end, and a tiny part of me felt stronger. I practiced the "I feel when I need" script. The first time I used it was with a friend who was always late. Instead of just silently fuming, I took a deep breath and said, "I feel disrespected when you're 30 minutes late, and don't text. I need you to just shoot me a message if you're running behind." It was terrifying. But my friend apologized, and it actually made our friendship better. Every boundary was like laying a new brick in my foundation of self-worth. Step 4. I understood the power of being seen by someone safe. I want to be crystal clear. I did not do this alone. I don't think most people can. Healing from relational trauma usually requires a healing relational experience. For me, that was therapy. Finding a therapist who got CN was a game changer. Her office became a safe space where I could be a complete mess without being judged. I'll never forget telling her a story from my childhood, one where I was deeply hurt and no one noticed. I told it in my usual detached way. She just listened, and when I finished, she looked at me with so much empathy and said, "That little girl must have felt so incredibly alone." And I just broke. I sobbed for that little girl. Her empathy was a mirror, reflecting my own pain back to me in a way I could finally accept. For others, this safe witness might be a support group or a deeply trusted, emotionally smart friend. The point is to practice being your real self with someone who can actually see and hear you. Step 5. I keep choosing to show up. And that's the thing. Healing isn't a destination. You don't just arrive. It's a daily practice of choosing to be seen. My life today is unrecognizable. My relationships are deeper because I can show up as myself. I can say what I need. I can handle conflict without falling apart. Do I still get anxious? Yes. Does that old perfectionist voice still whisper at me? Sometimes. But now I have another voice, my own, that can talk back. I have little rituals that keep me grounded. I still journal. I still do my check-ins. And I celebrate my own wins. If I finish a big project, I will literally buy myself a small trophy or take myself out for a nice dinner. It sounds silly, but it's me giving myself the acknowledgement I never got. It's me saying, "I see you. You did a good thing. You matter." My journey from invisible child to the person talking to you now wasn't about changing who I was. It was about uncovering who I was all along. It was about peeling back the layers of silence to find the vibrant, feeling person who was always there, waiting. It's about learning to give yourself the attention and validation you always needed. Healing isn't about blaming our parents, who were often just doing the best they could with what they had. It's about taking responsibility for our own inner world, there's now. It's about knowing your past doesn't have to write your future. The role you played in your family is not your identity. The silence you grew up in does not have to be the soundtrack for the rest of your life. If my story resonated with you, if you felt that hollow ache of being unseen, please hear this. You're not imagining it. Your pain is real and it is valid, even if it has no name and leaves no bruises. Your feelings matter. You matter. The first step can feel like the hardest, but it's just that one step. For me, it was learning the name for my experience. If you want to take that first step, I've put together a list of the resources that were absolute lifelines for me on my website. The books that opened my eyes, journaling prompts, and links for finding therapists who get it. The link is in the description. Be kind to yourself. The goal isn't perfection, it's presence. It's about showing up for yourself with the compassion you always deserved. Let's end with a small act of visibility, right here. Just take a moment. Close your eyes if you're comfortable. Take one deep breath. And just ask yourself, what am I feeling in this exact moment? Don't fix it. Don't judge it. Just notice it. That's it. That's the beginning. You are not the echo. You are the voice. And it's time to let it be heard.